All right, so I'm gonna break down the actual pre-trip inspection from the outside of the front cab. I'm gonna break it down into 4 different major components. One is gonna be your engine compartment. 2 is gonna be your suspension. 3 is gonna be your front brakes. And 4 is gonna be your front axle. All right, so let's get started with the engine compartment. Once you open up the hood of the vehicle, you should be able to find all of these components. There are going to be 10 subcategories that I'll be going through, and I'll be breaking them down each individually. And hopefully it's easy for you guys to remember this, because you definitely have to remember this. And every one of those, it has multiple checks that you want to get as many points as you can so you can pass this test with flying colors. First one is going to be your radiator reservoir. You're going to check and look at the coolant reservoir, and you're going to tell the instructor coolant is at proper operating level. You're going to look for the alternator, and you're going to tell them the alternator is belt driven, or it can be gear driven. But for this vehicle, my vehicle that I'm working on right now, my alternator is belt driven. The belt is not cracked, worn, or frayed. Belt is snug, no more than 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch of deflection. And I was demonstrating by putting my thumb on the actual belt and pushing forward. Wires are securely fastened. Alternator is not damaged or broken. Alternator is working properly and securely mounted. My water pump is belt driven. My water pump is not damaged or leaking. My water pump is working properly and securely mounted. My windshield washer reservoir is filled to the proper operating level. Then I would move to the other side of the vehicle. And the first thing that I'm going to be going through is going to be, I'm going to find a bigger hose, and I'm going to go to my engine compartment hoses and leaks on the ground. And then I'm going to be saying, 1. Hoses have no drips on the ground under the engine or transmission. 2. Hoses are not leaking or damaged. Clamps are tight. You're going to find the engine oil dipstick. Oil is at proper level and within safe operating range. That is it. That is the only thing I'm going to do for the engine oil dipstick, but I am going to point at it. Directly underneath that is my air compressor. My air compressor has 3 checks. 1. Air compressor is gear driven. 2. Compressor is not damaged or leaking air or fluid. Compressor is working properly and securely mounted. I'm going to go into my power steering pump and reservoir. I'm going to start by checking my power steering reservoir, and I'm going to say my fluid is at proper operating level. My power steering pump is gear driven, not damaged or leaking, working properly and securely mounted. I'm going to go into my steering box and hoses. My steering box is securely mounted, no missing nuts, bolts, cotter pins. Steering box and hoses are not damaged or leaking. I'm going to go to my steering linkage. Links, arms, and rods are not worn or cracked. Joints and sockets are not worn or loose. No missing nuts, bolts, or cotter pins. And that is just all the checks that I would do for my engine compartment. This is your suspension. Now, every suspension has key components that are very similar on every one of the vehicles, but when you get down to the class that you're taking, they have specific vehicles, so you need to identify what components are there or what components are not there. As far as for the vehicle that I'm getting certified in, my vehicle has spring mounts, spring hangers, leaf springs, bolts, U-bolts, and shock absorbers. And that's the vehicle that I'm going to certify in when I get ready to do my pre-trip inspection. For suspension, I'm going to go into my spring mounts and hangers. I'm going to point at them and are not cracked or broken. Bushings are not missing or damaged. Spring mounts and hangers are securely mounted to the frame. No loose or missing bolts. I would then locate my leaf springs. My leaf springs are not missing, shifted, cracked, or broken. On the leaf springs themselves, you have bolts and U-bolts. Bolts and U-bolts are not broken, loose, or missing. Shocks. Shock absorbers are secured and not leaking. That concludes my suspension. Front brakes. I'm going to start off with the brake hoses. Hoses, connections, and clamps are secured and not leaking. Hoses are not cracked, worn, or frayed, or leaking air. Brakes are air supplied. Then I'm going to locate the brake chamber. Brake chamber has no leaks, cracks, or dents. Brake chamber is securely mounted with no loose or missing clamps. Slack adjuster and push rods. Once I locate the slack adjuster and push rods, I'm going to point directly at it. Has no bends, broken, loose, missing parts. Push rods does not move more than 1 inch when pulled by hand when brake released. Brake lining. Lining are not worn dangerously thin, no signs of grease or oil on linings. Then I'm going to find the brake drums, either from the back or the front, just point at them. Drums have no cracks, dents, or holes, no loose or missing bolts, no debris, grease, or oil. Last, we have our front axle. Certain key components you want to memorize and be familiar with is going to be your tire, your wheel and rim, and your actual lug nuts and hub oil seals and axle seals. Front axle. I'm going to locate the tires. Sidewalls and threads have no cuts or damage. Tires have even wear. Thread depth is at 4/32 of an inch on steering tires. Valve stands and caps are not missing, broken, cut, or damaged. Tires are properly inflated, and you would check them with a tire gauge. Point at the wheel. Rims. Rims are free from welds. Rims are not bent or damaged. Lug nuts are not loose and do not have any rust trails around the nuts. No cracks are radiating from the bolt holes. No distorted bolt holes. Last, you would see in the very center of the wheel rim is your hub, oil seal, or axle seals. Hub is not leaking. Oil is at proper operating level. So memorizing this is pretty intensive when you first look at it, but you definitely, when you take the class, you get 2 weeks. So when you're done with the in-cab, you get out of the cab, you open your hood, you go into the engine compartment, you go into your suspension system, front brakes, and front axle. And this is everything that entails as far as everything that I just named off and everything that I just said is everything that the instructor or the certifying official is going to be looking for at test date.